Begin today at the Gemara towards the bottom of Mem Beis, Amud Beis, the Gemara right after the Mishnah. So this Mishnah listed the things that there's no chiyuv of a shvuah for them. Avodim, when there's an argument in Torah about slaves, shtaris, documents, karkais, lands, v'hekdeshes, and if it's in relation to a property owned by, or anything owned by hekdesh. And then the Mishnah went on to say that the same is also regarding the payment of kefil, when you pay double for a ganev, or above chamisha, when you pay 4 or 5 times as much, or by a shemeh chinam that has to swear when he claims that it got stolen from him, or by shemeh sacher as well. So regarding these items mentioned there, there's no chiyuv of a shvuah. So here the Gemara brings the source from the psukim for all of these cases. Sagt the Gemara, tashlume kefil minalam. From where do we see that the payment of double by a ganev does not apply for these cases? The Tana Rabbanon, so we learned in the Braise, it says in the pasuk in the parsha where it speaks about the ganev, al kol dvar pesha, anything that there's a pesha where the person is stealing. So that's a term that refers to anything that he's trying to steal. This actually speaks about a shomer that has someone's item in his possession, and he comes and claims that it got stolen, and really he's the ganev. He's stealing it himself. So therefore, it's essentially the parsha of the ganev. And the parsha where it speaks about that you have to pay kefil. So it begins with a klal. And then it says, al shayr, al chamayr, al sev, al salma. It gives examples of these details. An ox, a donkey, a lamb, or a garment, prat. So it specifies all these details. And then it says again, al kol aveda, anything that is lost. Chozav kolal, another klal. So this is a klal, uprat, a klal. And how do we understand this? Iyatadon, elaka ena prat. The Torah is saying that it has to be only something which is similar to what was specified here. Therefore, ma prat mufurish dovra metaltal v'gufei mamen. The prat that the Torah specifies is something which is movable and something that it has a value of money itself. Av kol dovra metaltal v'gufei mamen. So that means that the chiyuv of kefil that the pasuk here is speaking about is only if it's a movable item and it has a value of money itself. Yatsu karkais, therefore this excludes lands. She'em metaltalin, they're not movable, and also yatsu avodim, it excludes slaves. Shehukshu lekarkais, that are compared to lands, and yatsu shtaris, it also excludes documents. Shav pishahem metaltalin, even if they are movable, but ein gufan mamen. The value of the document is not that it itself is money; it's a document that you can use to collect money with it. And also the Braisa goes on to say that hektish. Regarding hektish, there's no kefil either, because in the parsha by hektish it says, and over there by kefil it says yishalim shnayim. Then the pasuk finishes off l're'ehu. It's when you steal from a friend, re'ehu ksiv, and therefore that excludes hektish, which is not a friend. Then the Mishnah said v'lo tashlumi arba v'chamisha, that regarding these items there's no payment of 4 or 5 times as much as which is a person that stole and then took that item that he stole, or animal that he stole, and sold it or slaughtered it. Why not? My time Tashlumi arba v'chamisha amar achmana. The Torah says that the knas is to pay 4 or 5 times as much as the value of what it is that you stole. But you don't pay 3 or 4 times as much. The kefil is part of the arba v'chamisha. You don't pay 4 or 5 times as much in addition to the double that you have to pay. You pay kefil, and then if he slaughtered or sold it, then you add and you pay that it comes to 4 or 5 times as much. But if you're not paying the kefil, that would mean that you would only pay 3 or 4 times as much as the value of what it is, and that the Torah does not obligate to pay. So if there's no kefil, there's no arba v'chamisha either. Shemeh chinam ein nishpa. Also, the Mishnah said regarding a shemeh chinam that is not being paid for being a guard to guard someone's object, and now he comes and claims that it got stolen, and therefore he wants to say that he's pater. He doesn't have to swear for this if it's these items that the Mishnah speaks about here. So Menana Mili, what's the source for this? The Tana Rabbanon. So in a Braisa we learned, it says in the pasuk, Ki yitein ishol re'eyu, if a person would give to his friend something to safeguard for him, and this pasuk is the parsha. This is the first parsha there where it speaks about a shemeh chinam. It doesn't say it clearly in the pasuk, but the Gemara in Bava Metzia explains that this pasuk is speaking about the shemeh chinam. So it begins with yiting. He gives to his friend, that's klal, whatever he gives him. Then the pasuk says kesef ekelim. He gave him either money or a vessel. So that's prat. That specifies specifically things that are like kesef and kelim. Lishmar, and then it says again that he should keep for him. Chazar v'kolal. It says again a term that includes anything. Klal uprat to klal, Iyatadon elaken a prat. So here as well we say that it has to be similar to the prat. Ma prat mefurish davar metaltal v'gufei mamin. It has to be a movable item and it has value of money itself. Av kol davar metaltal v'gufei mamin, and therefore yotza karkais, it excludes properties she'ein metaltalin that are not movable. Yotza avodim shehukshla karkais, excluding slaves that are compared to karka, and yotzu shtarais she'av hapisha metaltalin ein gufan mamin, excluding shtarais that are movable but do not have value of money, and hektish as well is excluded because here it also says re'eyu ksiv. The Torah says re'eyu, that does not include hektish. Okay, nice sachar. The last thing the Mishnah said regarding all these items that this doesn't apply. That's by the shem sachar ein mishalim. He does not have to pay. So from where do I know this? The Tan Rabbana. Okay, so we're talking over here about the shem sachar that comes and claims that there was a gneva, va'aveda. So usually by the shem sachar, if he claims that it got stolen or lost, he has to pay. But not for these items. So over here as well, this is the next parsha there in Parshas Mishpatim. This parsha, the Gemara says in Bab Metzia, is talking about the Shem Yisachar. That includes anything. Then it says Chamoir, Aishair, Aiseh, a donkey, an ox, or a lamb, Prat. It specifies this. Then it says V'chol beheim lishmar, any animal you gave that he should keep for you, Chazav v'kalal. It says again a klal. Klal uprat the klal chulu. The Gemara does not bring again all the details of the entire brisa. It's the same limud that it has to be similar to this prat. And then at the conclusion of the brisa, hektish is excluded because re'eyu ksiv. It says in the pasuk re'eyu that excludes hektish. Going to the next case that the Mishnah spoke about, since we're excluding karka, that there's no shvua regarding karka. So the Mishnah brought a machlokes, Rab Meir, yesh dvarim shen kekarka ve'enam kekarka chulu. There is a case that seems to be similar to karka, but it is not karka. So Rab Meir says, what's the case the Mishnah explained? In a case where a person gives his friend the vineyard, 10 vines that have grapes in it, and the grapes are ripe, and his friend is supposed to take care of it. And now, when it comes to give back, he says to him, you only gave me 5. Only 5 of this is yours. And so he's a Maida b'miktsas. So a Maida b'miktsas should be chayav v'shvua. Rab Meir says, even though this is vines connected to the ground, he's chayav v'shvua. The Chachamim say, no, it's attached to the ground. It's karka. So you potter from a shvua. So the Gemara explains, what's the machlokes here? Now, Meklal, it would seem that Rab Meir Sava, we can understand from this, that Rab Meir's opinion is, kol ha-mechubel lekarka, eine kakarka. Just because it's growing from the ground, it's attached to the ground, it doesn't have the status of the ground itself. Karka is only the actual property itself. If there's an argument about the ownership of the property, that's where the halacha that it's excluded from a chiyuv shvua applies. But if it's about the trees or the vines that are attached to the ground, that's not like karka. Says the Gemara, but if that's the basis of their machlokes, the miflegi b'tu'unais. Why are they arguing about vines? And the Mishnah specifically says that these are vines that have they're already, the grapes are on it, and it's ripe grapes. Liflagu b'srukais, they could be arguing about vines that don't have any grapes growing on it yet. The same machlokes. So therefore the Gemara changes and says, Ela Am Rab Yesi, or Am Rab Yesi b'Rab Chanina. Rab Yesi b'Rab Chanina says, Hacha ba'anavim oimdeis lehibatze kamiflagi. It's speaking about a vineyard that the vines have the grapes on it that are ripe and it's ready for harvest. The Rab Meir Sava kibetzuris damyan. Because it's already ripe, therefore it's like it's already cut from the ground. Rabbanan Savri loy kibetzuris damyan. And Rabbanan say that even though it's ripe grapes, it's not like it's detached, it's not like it's been cut, and therefore it's still attached to the ground, so it still has the din of karka. Right, so in the simple pshat of the Gemara, it sounds like it's talking dafka about completely ripe grapes. So it's really not getting any additional nourishment from the ground. It's totally ready. That's the argument, whether it's considered to be connected to the ground or not, because it's really not getting anything from the ground. But other Yishayim say, the Ran says that if it's completely ripe and it's getting nothing from the ground, Chacham wouldn't argue, everyone would agree that the fact that it's physically attached to the ground doesn't matter because it's not getting anything from the ground. When it says here that it's oimdes libatzer, it means that it's almost fully ripe. It could be cut already, but it still is getting additional nourishment from the ground. So here's where their machlokes is, whether it's considered to be karka or not. And the Mishnah said, Ein ishbain, another rule about the shvua, and in the case of a shvua for Maida b'miktsas, for examel, Ein ishbain el al dava shebemidah v'shebemishkol cholo. There is no shvua unless it's something which is a certain size or a certain weight or a certain number. And the Mishnah gave the example, if the claimant comes and says, I gave you this house full of things, buy a smolly or kiss smolly, a full bag, and the defendant says, whatever is there, that's what I got from you. It's not a full. Take a look, whatever's in the house, whatever's in the bag, that is what I got from you, which is less, which is not full. So since this is not a machlokes, this is not a din Torah about something which is a set amount, there's no shvuah. And the Mishnah gave the example, if the Toveya, the claimant, comes and says, I gave you up until this place in the house, until the ziz, and he says, no, it was more. It was until the chaloin. So you're giving a certain amount of space until where it is that he gave him, then there's a shvuah. So Omar Abaye explains regarding what it says in the Mishnah, Loishanu, the halach of the Mishnah was not taught that it's not specific enough, that he won't be chayav shvuah, ela damale bayis stam. It's because the claimant comes and says, I gave you a bias, I gave you a house full of these items. It doesn't specify which house, the size of the room, the size of the house. So then Yediyat Tanose. If he points to a specific house and he says, it's this house or this room that I gave you that's full of these items, so then it's understood exactly what his claim is, even though he did not specify exactly how much it is, but you could see that it's this bias which is full. And then when the defendant answers, no, not the full house, take a look what's there and you'll see only what's there. That is what you gave me. So even though the defendant is, when he's maida b'miktsas, he's not being maida a set amount, but since he said bayezeh, based on what he said regarding this house, we can understand regarding what he admits to, what exactly that amount is. Amalei Rave, so on this Rave says, if this is true, that this case would also be considered to be a set amount that you would be chayav shvuah, so if so, the Tani Seifer, the Mishnah goes on to say and give an example of a case which is a set amount. And what does the Mishnah say? The claimant says, I gave you that it was full all the way out to the ledge. And the defendant answers, no, it wasn't that full. It was only until the window. So then chayiv. Then that's considered to be a certain space that they're arguing about how much that was there, and then you'll be chayiv. But the question is, lifleik v'lisni b'dida. Why does the Mishnah have to give a new example? Why can't it use the same example it said before, that the claimant says, I gave you a house full, and make a distinction regarding this itself? And you would say as follows, if the claimant comes and says, I give you a house full, that's not specified what the amount is, and there's no shvuah. But if he's telling him it's this house, mole, that was full, then chayiv, then you would be chayiv, because then when the defendant admits and says, no, whatever is there, that's what it is that you gave me, so we can see based on this house, how much it is that the argument between them is. So therefore Rava argues, Rava says, La'olam ein chayiv, the defendant will not be chayiv to swear if he's a maida b'miktsas, ad sheyitaneno b'dav sheb'midav sheb'mishkal v'sheb'minyan, when the claimant is claiming something of a specific size, a specific weight, or a specific number, and and also the defendant, when he's admitting, he has to admit to something which is very specific, a certain size, weight, or number. It's not just enough the fact that the claimant claimed a certain set amount, and now based on what he claimed, you could look at what he admitted to, and even if he did not admit a certain amount, but you can make the cheshbon what the difference between what he's claiming and what he's admitting to is. It also has to be in what he's admitting to, that he should be admitting to something in his lashon that is a set amount. And therefore the Mishnah gives the example where he's saying ad chaziz and he's saying ad chaloin, and only then will there be a shvuah. Tanya Kavasei de Rava. So the Gemara brings a brayse that proves the point that Rava said. It's not clear in the brayse, but the Gemara is going to learn it out from something that it says in this brayse. Okay, so the brayse here goes through a few details about the chiyuv of shvuah of maita b'miktsas. So the brayse begins, kor tvueli biyadcha, you owe me the measurement, the amount of a kor of grain. And he responds and says, no, ein lecha biyadi, you have nothing. I owe you zero. Potter. So then he's potter. This is the one that's kaifer akoil. There's no shvuah. Menaira gedayla yesh biyadcha. I have a large menaira in your hands. That is mine. And he answers and says, no, ein lecha biyadi el menaira katana. The menaira that I have, I'm holding for you, is a small menaira. Potter. In this case, will be potter. And as the Gemara will explain, this is considered to be a case where the claim and the answer is not of the same min. It's not the same type. A menorah gedayla is one kind of menorah. A menorah katana is a different kind of menorah. It's like when in the examples of the Mishnah, ta'ane chitin, the claim is of wheat and the answer is of barley. So then you potter. Another example, a large belt you're holding for me in your hands. And he says, I have nothing. Ella izura katana. All right. He says, I have a small belt. Pot, also pot. This is also an example that's considered to be, it's a different min. A large belt is one kind of belt, and a small belt is a different belt. So he's potter. Now, if the claim is that you have an amount of a cord of mine in your hands, and the defendant answers and says, I have only half of a cord, which is a lesech. So then he's chayiv. This is the Maida b'miktsas. Or menorah bas esa litrin yesh li biyadcha. Have a menorah that's the weight of 10 litrin in your hands. And he responds, ein lecha biyadi ela bas chamesh litrin. The menorah that I have of yours is a menorah that only has the weight of 5 litrin. So then chayiv. Then this is also considered to be a Maida b'miktsas, and he will be chayiv. Now the Brisa concludes after this and says, Klolei shel dova. Here's the rule. L'olam ein chayiv. He will not be chayiv for the shvuah of a Maida b'miktsas ad sheyitanenu b'dova sheb'mida v'sheb'mishkal v'sheb'minyan, unless the claim is of something of a specific size, weight, or number, and v'yodeloi b'dova sheb'mida v'sheb'mishkal v'sheb'minyan, and he's admitting to something of a specific size, weight, or number. Now, klolei shel davar, the fact that the Brisa adds this line and it says this rule, and the Brisa specifies very clearly when it says the rule that the claim has to be of a certain amount, and what he admits to has to be for a certain amount. La suyemai. What is it coming to add? So, Lav, don't you think that it's coming to make the point that Rava said? La asuye bayizeh. It's coming to say that even bayizeh, when there was a very specific claim, but then what the defendant admitted to was not specific. The defendant just says, whatever is there in the house now, that is what I owe you. Not a full house. So it wasn't a specific thing that he admitted to. That also will be excluded of the shvuah of Maida b'miktsas. Therefore, the Brisa spells out that it has to be a specific claim and very specific what he admits to. Only then will there be a chiyuv of a shvuah. Okay, but now the Gemara goes back to a detail that was mentioned here in the Brisa that needs a clarification. What did the Brisa say? The Brisa brought 2 examples where there's a dentaita about a menorah. So now, what's the difference between them? What's the difference between the first case that the Brisa brings up, menorah gedayla or menorah katana? When the claimant says, you owe me a large menorah, and the defendant answers, no, it was a small menorah. So here we say there's no shvuah. Why? Because mashatanoi lehaydaloi. What the claim is not what he's admitting to. And what he's admitting to is b'chlal not what the claim is. A large menorah and a small menorah are not considered to be the same min. It's a different menorah altogether. So therefore you potter. But if so, you should say the same thing regarding the other case of the menorah. Bas eser bas chomesh nami. When the Brisa brings afterwards the example of a menorah that's the weight of 10 litrin, or a menorah that has the weight of only 5 litrin, so nami, same thing. It's a different menorah. It's large and small. That's why it's heavy or light. So why here does the Brisa say that there is a chiyuv of a shvuah of Maida b'miktsas? So the Gemara tries one answer. Omer Rav Shmuel by Rav Yitzchak, hacha, in the case where it's speaking about a menorah that is heavier, it's a 10 litrin or 5 litrin. It's a menorah b'menorah shechol yisaskina. This is a menorah that's made from parts. The kamaydele mine. Over here, he is being made that very same menorah. You say that I have a menorah from you that is 10 litrin. But so he answers him, no, that very same menorah that you say I'm holding for you, but I'm not holding a menorah for you that has so many parts, has so many branches, it has less on it, and therefore it weighs lighter. That's the reason. So it's the same menorah, but it's just less parts on it. So the Gemara asks on this, if that's the case, if that's the point regarding the menorah, and therefore by the menorah in this case, he's going to be chayav a shvuah, ihachi a zoyra nami. The same thing should be said regarding the belt. So Nisni, the Brisa should make the same distinction regarding a belt. And the me, and should say as follows, b'delaifi, that if it's a belt, that's also made up of parts. And the different parts of the belt are sewed together. And in such a case, if what's being claimed is a longer belt, and he's answering, no, I only have a shorter belt from you, then it's the same min. Why? Because it's the same min of the belt that's just made up of different parts, and he's being maided to a part of the belt. So why does the Brisa only make the distinction regarding the menorah? Ella, the answer is, the reason it doesn't say this distinction regarding the belt is because the laifi loikatani. The Brais here is not speaking about a belt that's made from parts that is sewed together. So hachanami, so if so, when it speaks about the case of the menaida, b'shachuli is loikatani. To say that the Brais here, when it's speaking about the menaida, which is 10 litrin or 5 litrin, it's not talking about a menaida that's made up of parts that are put together, sections that are put together. So if so, the question still remains, why in this case, when the claim is a menaida of 10 litrin, and the defendant says, no, only a menaida of 5 litrin, why is this the same min? It seems to be a large menaida and a small menaida, the same like the first case in this Braisa. So Rabbi Bar Mamel answers, the pshat is as follows. Shani menaida by a menaida. When they're arguing about the weight of this menaida, here it's different. It's actually the same menaida because hoyel v'yachal legaidera or lahamida a chamish litrin. This very same menaida, it's possible to scrape off. It's a big menaida. Let's say it's a silver menaida, and if it's a thick silver menaida, so then it's going to be 10 litrin of weight of silver. If you scrape it down and make it a thinner layer of silver, so then it's only going to be half. 5 litrin. So since this very same menaida could be scraped down in the thickness of the silver to be a lighter weight, so therefore it's the same. They're arguing about the same menaida, the same min. The only question is how thick the silver is. Whereas in the first case of the Braisa, a large menaida and a small menaida, that's large or small. It's a completely different menaida. And therefore there, it's a different type of menaida that he's admitting to, so there's no shvuah here. Another case here, which will give examples for the halacha of Meideh b'miktsas. Hamalva es chaveiroi ala mashkin. A person lent money to his friend, and he gives him a collateral. The borrower gives the lender a collateral for this loan. Now what happened is v'avad mashkin. This collateral, the lender lost it. Now the argument between the lender and the borrower is, what was the value of this mashkin that he gave him? So Amaloi, so the lender says, Sela el visicha. I lent you a sela, olav, on this mashkin that you gave me. But vishekel hayeshava. The mashkin that you gave me was only worth a shekel. A shekel is a half a sela. And therefore what he's saying to the borrower is, you gave me this mashkin, I lost the mashkin, but you still owe me a half. You still owe me a shekel. And the borrower says, no, like it, that's not the case. Yes, you lent me a sela olav on this mashkin, but v'sela yeshava. The mashkin I gave you was the full value of this loan. And so therefore, if you lost it, so then I don't have to pay. So now the Mishnah says in such a case, the borrower is a kaifer akel. He's saying that I don't owe you anything for this loan anymore, so therefore pater. He's pater from any shvuah, like every case of a person that denies the entire claim. However, if the case is selel v'sicha olav, I lent you a sela for this mashkin, and v'shekel ha'yeshava, and the mashkin was worth half, only a shekel, so you still owe me half of the loan. And now, what is in this case? What does the borrower say? Loiki, this is not true. Yes, it's true that you lent me a sela, but how much was the value of the mashkin? This mashkin was worth 3 dinar. Every sela is 4 dinar. So he says it was worth 3 dinar. So now he's a Meideh b'miktsas, because the malva is saying that you still owe me 2 dinar. Because the mashkin that you gave me was worth only a shekel, which is 2 dinar, so you still owe me 2 dinar. And the borrower responds and says, no, the mashkin that I gave you was worth 3 dinar, so I only owe you 1 dinar. So he's a Meideh b'miktsas. So chayiv, this is the case of a Meideh b'miktsas, and he's chayiv to swear for this. Another example, 2 examples here regarding whether he would be a Meideh b'miktsas or not, and here the Meideh b'miktsas would be the lender. So first the Mishnah begins with the case of Sela Halvisani Olav. Now the borrower begins, and the borrower is the one that's claiming. And the borrower says that you lent me a Sela. I gave you a mashkin that was actually double the value. It was 2 sloim worth what this mashkin that you lost was. And therefore you owe me now. You lost this mashkin. The borrower now is saying to the lender, you owe me a Sela. And the lender says, Loiki, that's not true. I lent you a sela, and the mashkin that you gave me was worth the same amount, a sela, and I lost it, and therefore that's it, fair and square, I'm potter. So in this case, he's a kaifer hakayil, potter. He's potter from any shua. Now, if the case though is sela al visani olav, the borrower says that you lent me a sela on this mashkin, v'shtayim yishave, and the mashkin I gave you was worth double. It was worth 2 slayim. V'haloimer, and the lender, the malva says, loiki, that's not true. Ela salve v'sicha, I lent you a sela olav in this v'chamisha dinarim hayishave. It wasn't worth double, but it was worth more than the loan. It was worth 5 dinar. So he's admitting to something. He's admitting that he owes that one extra dinar that the value of the mashkin was. So he's a meidu b'miktzas and chayev. So therefore he has to swear. So in this case, it's the lender that's swearing because he's admitting that the mashkin that he got was worth a little bit more than the value of the loan. And the loiva said, the borrower said it was double, and he says it was 1 dinar, so he's chayev. Now, Umi Nishpa, who is the one that swears? Mi shah pikadin etzlai. The chiyuv of the shvuah will always be placed only on the one that has the pikadin by him. In this case, the mashkin, which is the lender. The lender that has the mashkin by him, and he claims now that he lost it, he is the one that will have to swear about this. And the Gemara will explain that this actually, which case this goes on, but here, this is what the Mishnah is clarifying. Dafka, the lender that had the mashkin in his possession, he's the one that has to swear. Why? Why don't we want the borrower to swear? In the case before, there was the case where the borrower is the one that's the meidu b'miktzas. Because Shema Yishavazeh, because what's if the borrower is going to swear that he's right and what he's denying is true, and now what's going to happen? And then the lender, which is the one that has the mashkin and claims that he lost it, then he'll take out this pekadon and he'll prove that the shvuah of the loive was a lie. So Rashi here says, why do we want this to happen? Because maybe the borrower, when he gave this mashkin, he wasn't so medactic, he wasn't looking so specifically to see what its value is, and he was under the impression that it had this value, it had more of a value, and therefore he's swearing about this. And then when the mashkin will be brought out, it'll turn out that he swore falsely, and that's going to passel him now. He's going to be passel edus and passel for any shvuah and for the future, and that's a terrible thing that should happen to this person. So therefore we want to prevent such a thing, and therefore let the one that has the mashkin in his possession swear and not the loive. That's Rashi's pshat. Taisus, however, over here says that this is not the reason for what the Mishnah is saying, because Taisus says this is a takana for a rasha. If this person doesn't know exactly what its value is and he's coming and claiming that it has this amount and he's swearing falsely, that's his problem. We're not going to make a takana to prevent him of swearing falsely about this. So therefore, Taisus says that the reason is that we don't want a shvuah of the loiva to be levatala. If the malva is the one that's claiming that it got lost, it could be that the malva really has it, and he just doesn't want to take it out. He wants to keep it. So we make the malva swear, and then that will force him to take out this pekadon that he still has, or this mashkin that he still has, and there'll be no shvuah at all. We're trying to avoid a shvuah. We don't want a shvuah to be levatala.
He's not the meidu b'miktzas.
Oh, true, he's not. So now let's see the pshat in the Gemara. It's a takanas chachamim. Even though he's not the meidu b'miktzas, we transfer the shvuah to him. So the Gemara here will explain exactly on which case this last line of the Mishnah goes on.
He can make a mistake.
Again?
He can also make a mistake in the shvuah.
He has it in his possession, or maybe if he actually lost it, then he doesn't have it anymore. True, but if he doesn't have it though, he's not going to take it out again. So we'll never see that it was a lie, the shvuah. Okay, Zok Gemara Ahai. This last line of the Mishnah, that we put the shvuah on the one that has the pekadon, or in this case the mashkin, in his possession. On what case was the Mishnah coming to say this? Ilema Seife, was it saying this regarding the second part of the Mishnah, where it was speaking about the case where the lender is the one that's the meidu b'miktzas? So you don't need the Mishnah to add this line. V'teipikle, the shvuah gabe malva. The shvuah is by the lender in the first place. He is the one that's the meidu b'miktzas. Of course he swears. So you don't need a special din that the Mishnah says that Chachamim institute to place the shvuah on him. So therefore the Gemara says, Elo mashmul, or there's no Elo here, sorry. O mashmul, so Shmuel explains, Areisha. The last line of the Mishnah, that they put the shvuah on the malva, refers to the reisha of the Mishnah. And v'chein omer Rab Chiya bar Rav areisha. that it refers to the Reisha of the Mishnah. V'chein Amar Rav Yochanan a Reisha, on the Reisha of the Mishnah. Now, my Reisha, what case of the Reisha of the Mishnah is it? Say for the Reisha. The second case of the Reisha of the Mishnah, as the Gemara here brings. Sela helvisicha olav, I lent you a sela for this mashkin that you gave me, v'shekel lo yeshove, and the lender claims that this mashkin was only worth half of the loan, shekel. V'haloim eloikiel esela el v'sane olav v'shloisha dinarim lo yeshove. He's admitting partially, and he's saying that it wasn't the full value of the loan, but it was worth more. It wasn't worth 2 dinarim, which is a shekel, but it was worth 3. So here, in this case, the loiva, the borrower, is the meidah b'miktsas, and chayiv, he has to make a shvuah. The shvuah gabi loivihi. It's in this case where who's the one that's made b'miktsas? The borrower. V'shaklu Rabbanon, and the Rabbanon took this shvuah miloive, from the loive, that's the made b'miktsas, v'shadua a malva, and they placed the shvuah onto the malva, that let the malva swear instead of the loive. Why? Because as the Mishnah said, we don't want the loive to swear in this case, and then the malva may actually have this mashkin in his possession, and he may bring it out afterwards, which will prove that the loive swore falsely. So even though the loive is the meidah b'miktsas, there's a takanas chachamim that the malva swears instead. That's the case that this last line of the Mishnah was going on. Okay, but now the Gemara actually says, v'hashta, the Amar Ravashi. Now that Ravashi teaches the following halacha, and this is in the Gemara in Bava Metzia, where Ravashi teaches the kaimelam, that the halacha is that even in this case here, where it's the loive that's the meidah b'miktsas, the malva, which had this mashkin in his possession, so the malva holding this mashkin is basically like a shomer that is holding a pekadon in his possession, and he claims that it got lost. So the halacha regarding every shomer that holds a pekadon in his possession and claims that it got lost, that zeh nishba she'ena b'reshusay. This person that's like a shomer holding a pekadon, he has to swear that he doesn't have it in his possession. This is not a shvuah min ha-Torah, this is a shvuah that Chachamim instituted. We're afraid that when a shomer has a pekadon and he claims that it got lost, he wants to keep it for himself and he's claiming that it got lost. So he has to swear that he does not have it in his possession. So just like the loiv has to swear, the malva also, in this case, the malva, which is the one holding the pekadon, he also has to swear. And v'zenish ba kama shaveh. And this one, meaning in this case the loive, he swears what its value was. So they actually both have to swear in this case. If so, what's the pshat in our Mishnah? When our Mishnah says that we take the shvuah of the loive and we put it on the malva, that's not what the Mishnah really means. Because really the malva anyways has to swear about this pekadon, that it's not in his possession. So we're not concerned that he's going to take it out afterwards. He's swearing that it's not in his possession. So Hachi Ka'amar, this is what our Mishnah is saying. Mi nishbat chila. Who is it that's going to have to swear first? Misha pekadon etzloi. Let the malva that has this mashkin, this pekadon in his possession, and he's claiming that it got lost, let him swear first, and that he doesn't have it. Because if not, shema yishavazeh, if we allow the one that's meidah b'miktsas, the loive, to swear first about its value, so then he may swear, and then v'yotzi alos pekadon. And now, after the malva will see that what he swore about its value is false, so they'll say, "Oh, I found it." And now he's going to prove him that he swore falsely about this. So let the malva that had it in his possession first swear that he does not have it. And now that we're sure that he doesn't have it anymore, now the loiv, which is the meidah b'miktsas, let him swear that he's a meidah b'miktsas, for the shvuah of a meidah b'miktsas. That's the pshat in the Mishnah according to this takana that Rav Ashi said. Okay, now the Gemara starts a new inyan. This is halacha b'chlal regarding a mashkin, and this will connect back to our Mishnah. Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel said the following halacha: Hai man de oisvei alfa zuzah lechavre. A person lent his friend a large amount of money, 1,000 zuz. Or mashkin lei, and now the borrower gave as a collateral a very small item, kato de magla, just a handle of a saw. I think that's what a magla is, or a sickle. Okay, so he gave him a very small mashkin. So now the halacha though is avad kata. If the lender loses this mashkin, this kata de magla, this handle of this sickle, avad alfa zuzi. He loses his right to collect the entire loan of 1,000 zuz, because this is the understanding between them. I'm giving you this mashkin. When it comes time of payment, when you return me the mashkin, then I'll pay you. If you don't have the mashkin, if you lost the mashkin, you lost your right to collect the loan. That's regarding this one handle that he got. Now, aval tarti katoti. If the borrower gave him two handles, two mashkins, then loy, we're not going to say this. Which means we're not going to say that if he gave him two handles and the loan was 1,000 zuz, so one handle was for the value of half of the loan, and another handle was for the other half for another 500 zuz of this loan. And if he loses one handle, so then he loses his right to collect one half of the loan. If he loses the other handle, he loses his right to collect the other half of the loan. It doesn't work like that. When it's two, if you gave him two of these handles as a mashkin, as long as the lender has part of that mashkin left to give back, if he lost one handle and he still has the other handle that he's able to give back, if he gives back that handle to the borrower, then he's going to be able to collect his loan. The value of the other handle that he lost, he'll have to reimburse it with money. But as long as there's something left of the mashkin that he got that he's returning, he has the right to collect his loan. But if he got a mashkin that he lost completely, then he lost his right to collect the loan. That's what Shmuel said. Now, on this, there's an argument regarding these. The concept here, everybody agrees to, but there's an argument here on the details about this. But Rav Nachman says, "Afile tarti katoti." Even if he gets two handles, very small items that are a mashkin for this large loan of 1,000 zuz, the way it works is avad chade. If the lender comes and says, "I lost one handle," avad chamish meya. That means he lost a right to collect half of the loan, even though the handle is not worth at all 500, but that one handle was a mashkin for half of the loan. Avad idach, he loses the other handle. Avad kulei, now he lost the rights to collect the entire loan. Each handle is like for the right, giving him the rights to collect half of the loan. That's the understanding when you got these two handles. Avo, but Rav Nachman agrees. He says if it's a kata, if he gets one handle, a small item like a handle, which is not made for payment, it's just made as a mashkin. So yeah, the handle is considered to be a mashkin for the loan. And the nasche, but then besides the handle, he gave him a nasche, a piece of silver. So here, regarding the piece of silver, loy, we don't say this concept. Regarding the piece of silver, whatever the value of this piece of silver is, that's what it is for the payment of the loan. If you lost that piece of silver, you're not going to say, oh, because you lost this piece of silver, so that's considered to be for the other half of the loan. Katos for one half, and the naschas for the other half. A nascha, a piece of silver, is actually something which is usually used for real payment. You pay with silver. So since you got the nascha, whatever the actual value of the nascha is, that's what the lender will lose when he loses the nascha. It's not going to be considered for the other half of the loan. This is what Rav Nachman says. So, we're over here. Yeah. So, second, sorry. Yeah, okay. Now, the third opinion here, Nerdoi Yomri, Nerdoi say, Nerafile Kata Venascha. The same point will apply even regarding if he gets a handle and he gets this piece of silver. And that is Avad Nascha. When you lose this piece of silver, regardless of what its value is, the understanding is he's getting two mashkins. So the understanding over here is that each mashkin is for a half of the loan. So if you lose the Nascha, Avad Palga, you lose your rights to collect one half of the loan, regardless of how large that half of the loan is. Avad kata, you lose the other handle. Avad kule, so then you lose the rights to collect the entire loan. Okay, as I said, there's machlokes in here about the details, but the point of what Shmuel was mechadish is that the understanding of the concept of a mashkin is when the lender gets a mashkin, if he's not going to have the mashkin to give back to the borrower, he loses his rights to collect the entire loan, even if it's a much larger amount than the value of the mashkin. So the Gemara asks from what it said in our Mishnah. Tanan, in the Mishnah it said, Sela al visicha, the lender says, I lent you a sela, Olav, on this mashkin. And v'shekel yeshave. And the mashkin was only half of that amount, only the worth of a shekel. And the borrower comes and answers, Loiki, no, that's not the case. You lent me a sela, Olav, on this mashkin, v'shloisha dinarim yeshave. And its value was 3 dinar. Chayiv. So the Mishnah says he's chayiv, he's a moide b'miktzas. But the question is, lei melei, why doesn't the borrower say to the lender, ha kabilte, you got this mashkin, and until you don't return me the mashkin, I don't owe you a penny. The way Shmuel just explained, once the lender gets a mashkin, and he doesn't have that mashkin, so then he can't collect anything. So why is the loiva here making a shvua as a moide b'miktzas? Answers the Gemara, masnisen b'deparish. The case of our Mishnah is in the case where it was specified very clearly that I'm only taking this mashkin and I'm going to be responsible for the value of this mashkin. If I lose it, then I only lose in the loan the value of this mashkin. Shmuel with the loy parish. However, Shmuel was speaking about a case where a lender receives a mashkin and there was nothing specified to make clear what the deal over here is regarding the loan versus the value of the mashkin. In such a case, the understanding of a lender that receives a mashkin is that if he loses the mashkin, he loses his rights to collect the loan completely. That's why there's no question from our Mishnah.